Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 169, the total beginner's primer to writing. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I am your haiku master, Michael Miller. Although I think
Charles is the
I was just about to say that I think my my crown is definitely stolen and tarnished by the brilliance of Charles Lee here.
I tell you, I swear, it's like I could not keep up with that thread. Of course, I was actually trying to get some work done in that period of time, unlike everyone else. But
well, it's funny
when
because
you work for yourself, because you hold yourself to.
Go ahead.
It's funny when you work for yourself, you hold yourself to a higher standard of what you need to get done during the day than when you work for someone else.
What cracks me up is like this episode's going to go up like a month after this is occurring. So like we're literally discussing the very first haiku series about the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. But by now we're probably on to our third. I know what our next three are going to be. So I would drop it here. I probably could drop it here because by now we've been through them. So there's probably been some brilliant Star Wars and Harry Potter haikus, I would imagine at this point.
Michael?
Yes.
I just don't want you to get cheap and get so competitive with Charles that you start finding really obscure fiction that only you know.
No, I wouldn't do that. I'm not competitive with. I wouldn't say I'm competitive with Charles. I love. He's brilliant. Like some of the stuff that he's writing. And I don't want to just point out Charles because everybody, Matt, Sean, I know I'm forgetting a couple of people, but like they like Rebecca, yes, Rebecca had a couple of good ones in there. But like I even said
Charles
in another episode,
prolific,
like, yeah, he was on a tear, an absolute tear. But this episode is actually inspired by Charles because he was requesting an episode about the very beginnings of writing, basically. Or rather, he might have been saying something a little different, but I, modified it to be like a primer for, like, if you're just inspired by fantasy, if you're inspired by fiction, you want to write something, but you don't have writing experience. Like, how do you actually start? That's what this episode is about.
Yes. And, I love this episode, and I don't think we've ever actually talked about starting writing. I mean, I know we've talked about writing a few times here or there. We've talked a little bit about storytelling, but specifically writing. How do you get started? And really, it comes down to me, for me, to just start writing, you need only two things. And I could only say one if I wanted to, but I think that's BS. You have to have two things, I believe. You have to read, and you have to write books. They don't have to be books. They can be short stories. I'm sorry. They don't necessarily have to be like traditional novels, but you have to read and you have to write. You have to do those two things. Okay, episode done. All right. We'll see you next week.
Well, no. I was actually my mail, it was loading really slow, so I was trying to load the modified show notes that you have returned to me. And just to be fair, so everyone knows, like I wrote up the show notes for this one, but I sent them to the Jeff and he's like, no, this is terrible. And he's now sent them back to me, which I plan to ignore the whole time. So.
Well, like I said, I would get more concerned about you having correct show notes on time if you actually ever utilize them.
Well, I'm going to use my show notes. If I write them, of course I'm going to write, because my show notes are brilliant. So where do you want to start aside to? Well, let's just talk about reading for a minute, since we're talking about the very beginning, reading and writing. I would imagine anybody listening to this show is probably a reader. But let's say you're not. Let's say you stumbled onto this because you're a tabletop player. I was not a big fan of reading when I was young. I think maybe because I wasn't good at it. And I also had vision problems that went undiagnosed for a very long time. Like I didn't get glasses until I was in like the second grade. So I had failed the second grade. Like they held me back. And then it finally dawned on somebody because I was crying in class because I couldn't read the board. And they were like, he can't see. Like, how did he get this far? And no one caught that he can't see. So I didn't read for a long time. And I think it was because I felt intimidated by it. And my first real venture into reading was comic books. Like, once I got into comic books, and even that I got in late. Like, the only reading I really did was this school-signed reading, and then I got into comic books probably about junior high when I really started getting into it, definitely in high school. So I found that a much more approachable, digestible way to get into it. And then that, of course, sparked my desire to get into weird fiction. And right after high school, actually, I wasn't really novel reading until after high school. I discovered Eve Forward's Villains by Necessity for $1 at a bookstore that I was doing electric.
So check the bargain bin is what you're saying.
Definitely. But I got so lucky because that novel is absolutely brilliant. I paid $1 for the hardcover. I can't find that hardcover today. I'm very sad about it because that hardcover is now, because it's out of print now, it's worth like $200 roughly. It's like $150 if you want to buy it on Amazon or eBay. You're going to pay about $150 for that book. But that book is a fantasy tale that is just brilliant, and that really solidified me as a writer, that one book. And from there, I've been a big reader ever since.
Well, I had sort of a similar journey where I had different kinds of vision issues. I had what they call a lazy eye, just an extension of my personality.
I was about to say, so they just singled out your eye, even though all of you is lazy. He's got a lazy eye, a lazy mouth, a lazy nose, a lazy butt. But we can work on the eyes here at the optometrist.
No, but it's like I had a lazy eye when I was a kid, and so where I could see stuff actually better than perfect, I would get a headache reading. And so after a while, and my mom started fighting with the schools because my mom caught it, and because I could go through the books that were assigned, like when you're a little kid, the easy picture books, and I would go through, and if you were only half paying attention to me, I was telling you the story of what happens. But my mom realized
without a narrative.
I wasn't reading. Exactly. I was a natural BSer. And my mom just, she knew just due to genetics it had to be. She's trying to convince the teachers, but they're like, no, he stepped up from the classroom. He read the book. She's like, watch the words he's supposed to be saying. They are not there. And so
your mom's a very smart woman and very perceptive to have picked up on all the little, because you've told me other stories about your mom understanding you. Yes,
my mom is one of those people who has very good people skills for that kind of stuff. Let's turn my camera up here so Mike doesn't whine during the middle of the episode. And finally,
that's never gonna happen. I'm always gonna whine during the episode.
No, I meant about my head being cut off.
Oh no, I would love to get your head cut off. I've got plans for that one.
So around the fourth grade, much like Michael, I was actually held back a grade because I
didn't know
bullshitted. Yeah, I bullshitted myself up into the fourth grade, and that's when my mom finally convinced them that the book started getting a little too complex and not enough pictures. And Jeffrey started to really struggle with reading magically.
Surprisingly, he's been so astute so far.
And I got held back in the fourth grade, so I didn't realize that was something we had in common. And luckily for me, very early, one of my friends introduced me, instead of comic books, it was to this strange thing called Dungeons and Dragons. And Dungeons and Dragons led me to The Hobbit. The Hobbit led me to, probably where I am today. So thank you, D&D and The Hobbit. And I might be flipping the order of those two things.
That's okay.
But I'm not sure which I found first, but those two things were really, for me, the primer. And then I found comic books, actually, I was in the service when I really found comic books.
Yeah.
So I was, like 19, 20. But I'd started reading, but like it was funny if you like.
You weren't alive. You weren't alive in 1920.
Yes, I was.
Oh, you mean at ages 19 or 20?
Oh no, but that was in 1919 and 1920.
That was in 1919 and 1922. So you were born in 1900.
I just look really good for my age. That's all.
You do look really good for your age, which is ironic considering how bad you look compared to everyone else.
I said for my age.
I know. I was clarifying.
I'm 117. Give the guy a break. Okay.
So I don't care how you approach it. These are just ways how Jeff and I got there. But you should be reading your butt off. You should be reading tons of stuff. I read all the time. I don't get to read as many novels as I would like these days. The thing that I very much hate about living in Connecticut, as opposed to when I lived in New York, is in New York I could ride the subway and I could read all the way to work and all the way home. I would burn through about 2 novels a month. My best was like 5 novels in a month. And
now,
I loved that. But because I have to drive to work now, I can't read while I'm driving.
The listeners should ignore this advice, but Michael, I think you could read while you drive. That would be fine.
Thanks. Thanks a ton. As a matter of fact, I've got material for you that you should definitely read. I'm going to buy you books. You put them right on the dashboard.
But definitely, and experiment around in reading. Find different genres. There's utopian, there's dystopian, there's westerns. There's obviously fantasy,
horror,
science fiction, and
noir,
horror, paranoia,
thriller. Military
go
intrigue.
Explore different genres if you're not sure, because even if you want to do fantasy, or even if you want to do science fiction, both genres blend exceptionally well with other ones.
Yeah, and not only that, all genres have something to contribute. I had a friend of mine she's fiercely intelligent and a huge reader, just a voracious reader. And she actually turned me on to a series of romance novels. Now, I'll admit, I have not read the series. I have read most of the first book. I got off of it. For some reason, I picked up another book and I do that. I'll read a book and I'll be reading 5 books at a time. So sometimes they'll fall by the wayside. This one did fall by the wayside, but it was really good what I was reading. It was a romance novel. It was also a crime thriller, but it was a romance novel. But it was good. And there's definitely things to be picked up from other genres. So you want to stretch. What I have discovered recently, and this was something from the group where we were talking about different things that we've read, is that I actually read way more science fiction than anything else. I would have assumed that I was more of a science fiction, more fantasy guy. But I realized that I'm going through the things that I've read in my favorite books, and it's way more science fiction than it is fantasy. So, but don't be afraid to pick up a book that is definitely outside of your purview, because you will find stuff. You'd be surprised, and you'd also be surprised you might find something a genre that you love that you never would have considered trying. And
not only that, though, is you will find stuff in different writers that impress the shit out of you. So there we went.
We went right into explicit. Do you want to restate that, or
yes,
you're fine with it? This show is going to get reclassified, isn't it? You're just going to, episode after episode, we're going to go fly right into explicit.
Oh, my God.
What I was about to say...
Sorry, that's the soldier in me. It just happened.
You're too much. Too much. Was about reading other things. I'm losing my train of thought because you got me laughing. It was something about reading different genres. There was an idea there that was important about reading other genres. Well,
you think about that for a second. I'll give you mine. As
okay, go ahead.
It's like the way a different author in a different genre will treat the characters or approach. If you really want to have, romance is one of those things that at some element is in a lot of fiction. You will need to either tease with it, or maybe there is an actual romantic subplot in a book that you're doing. If you want to know how to deliver them in ways that work well literally, you need to read romance novels. And there are genre ones if you want to be picky, but find the people who do it really well. I like classic literature. I'm trying to start going back and reading some of these things that I didn't read that I should have read in high school.
I got books like that.
Because I could BS my way through them in class. So it's the Canterbury Tales, Dante's Inferno. I got through those in school, but I never actually read them. Yeah. So, it's because the thing is, these things have held over time, and that's even more amazing. So what are the attributes of those kind of books that held over time? Why are those books still there and other contemporary books that I've never heard of?
Well, the thing is though, like I don't want to get into a huge discussion about how literature changes and comparing old literature to new literature, but there's definitely reasons for that. And what I was about, I do remember my thought, and this does kind of dovetail into some of what you're saying, is old literature is sometimes very hard to read. Sometimes, and the reason old literature is important is because it laid a foundation. That doesn't mean it's what you need to read and understand now. And you can learn a lot of the things from old literature from new literature. Not all of it. I will say there's some absolutely groundbreaking landmark stuff that old literature did that new literature doesn't. But an important thing is, if your time is very limited, like for my reading time is pretty limited. I really these days
read newer stuff.
Yeah, I only get to read like a little bit at bedtime generally. But if your time is limited reading wise, understand that if you're reading something and you're not getting anything out of it and you're hating it, it's okay to put it down. It's okay to put it down, let it go, and pick a new thing. I've certainly done that.
Give it to that guy you don't like. Yeah,
maybe. Like I've read all of the Robert Ludlum Jason Bourne books, but off of I think the fourth or fifth book. I think it's the fifth book. I think his son or another writer took over the character and wrote another Jason Bourne tale.
Oh, interesting.
So I was like, I'm going to give this a try, and I started reading it, and not to punch a hole in the man's work. I'm sure the book is good, but having read all of the Robert Ludlum ones and getting to this, in the very beginning of the book, they already started to kind of contradict some of the things that were established in the prior books, and I had a hard time running with it. So I eventually
it didn't work for you.
It didn't work for me. So eventually I put it down. But that's the thing is, like, you know, read. You got to be reading. Read a lot.
And just one more like suggestion for people who do genre fiction that is today or earlier. You know, if it's today books, read contemporary novels. If it's historical, like medieval fantasy, read historical fiction about medieval times on Earth, because it'll help you sort of encapsulate a way to deliver the ancientness of stuff. And this is something I haven't done much of, and I probably should do more of. But I mean, just think about that in that sense. You kind of arm yourself on how to deliver, life in a different type of village. You know, because we're the suburbs we live in, in the United States and in most of the industrialized world are at such a high level of wealth compared to where they were even 100 years ago, and definitely over 1,000 years ago. You know, where I don't think we can completely grasp, and I don't think you want to make it accurate, because if it's accurate, it won't seem believable to people.
Yeah, that's the irony. There's so many things in our fiction, especially with movies, where making it accurate makes it unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, like my best example all time was when a video game company was making a combat simulator for the Marines, but they had permission. I was just thinking of this. Yep, they had permission to actually turn it into a video game and sell it with the approval of the Marines to make sure that nothing important leaked out through it. They actually went and they did all the changes they needed to make for the Marines, and they released it into beta for the thing. And the feedback they were getting from people was, oh, the gunfire is not realistic, the weapons don't act correctly, blah, blah, blah. And the problem was it was actually perfectly accurate to life. But video game players are so accustomed to the bombastic nature of games like Call of Duty and other, more arcadey style shooters that they weren't buying that this game was the way it should be. And they're like, no, in real life, this is how these guns work. Yes. It's not all simple sometimes, and practice and experience make you better at doing things. But that is the beautiful thing of the, and I'm a big believer. If you look to the stories of history for inspiration for your stories as sort of a foundation for them too, and it's like we use the same ones over and over again sometimes, like, okay, Matrix, Jesus, that was the gospel of Matthew. I'm sorry. That's what the Matrix was a gospel of Matthew in a different setting. It's fine. But I mean, RoboCop is a Jesus allegory. But Jesus allegory is huge. Why?
because a lot of people identify themselves as Christian, and it hooks them in subconsciously. And I love The Matrix. It was a great movie, and I would have called it original, even though I saw when I was watching it, I'm like, okay, that's John the Baptist. Okay, that's Judas. Judas is easy, but you can identify these characters. Oh wait, that's the doubting one.
Not only
it all pops out when you watch it.
Not only that, like I laughed when everyone's like, "Oh, The Matrix is so original." I'm like, no. I'm like, it's original because they're delivering it in movie form. But I have had a discussion about this exact scenario in a philosophy class like 6 years prior. I was like, this thought is old.
You were playing a one-shot video tabletop game at that point, which was very similar to that.
That's true. I forgot about that. That's true. Mm-hmm. Was that one of the medieval vampire
that was Jim's.
ones? Which one?
That was Jim's.
Which ones?
That was Jim's Confederate game, I believe.
I don't know if I played that one. I'm aware.
It was with you one-on-one in New York. That's the game. When the mage game that you played in New York with Jim was essentially you were in the Matrix. It wasn't thought of at that point in his mind because he hadn't seen the movie. And when the movie came out, he called me because he's like, ah!
That's funny. Yeah. It's like you with American Gods.
Exactly. Neil Gaiman.
Anyway.
But, realize it won't always be original. But, just read, learn techniques, learn how the delivery works for people who've done it because they're published. That's how you know that they've done it.
So transitioning from the reading to the writing, the first thing I'm going to recommend is to write book reports. Since you've been doing all this reading now, write book reports. You may remember all of the stress and importance placed on comprehension in school, all those reading comprehension classes. I mean, I don't know what school is like these days, but when I was a kid, reading comprehension was stressed very heavily. And make sure that you write it in your own words, explain what happened to this character and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's great that if you're reading a lot, but you need to make sure that you're actually understanding what you're reading. I can't tell you how many times I've been reading something and then realized that my brain was active and I was on a thought thinking about something, and I've read 2-3 pages and I can't remember what happened. So I flip a few pages back and I continue reading because I know that I was reading it, but I wasn't comprehending it. I wasn't remembering it. So I go back.
Built off of what Michael just said there, a lot of times people will say, I don't know how to start sharing. I'm not exactly sure where I want to go. Taking these books in your life and sharing them is something people find interesting. They want different people's perspective on books that they might want to read or that they are reading. An initial thing that you could start doing as you're trying to figure out how to write your novel or you're trying to figure out how to deliver the story you're going to deliver, if you want to share it ultimately, make sure that you, as soon as you want to share it, start sharing online something. Because that will allow you to attract, and it might not be a lot, but you'll attract some people to you. And over time, you can just transition over from being book reports, and obviously don't deliver like you would in kindergarten, but and it could be on YouTube, it could be on podcast,
you could
whatever.
Start it that way. I mean, if we're talking like really basic primer, like if you have no writing experience, that's not a bad place to start.
But the point is, what you do is you take all of these books that you're reading, and you exploring them with your mind becomes content you can share out to start attracting people into you that like your personality. Because ultimately, if you want to be a successful author, you need fans, and you need to present them with value when you sell your books, and that's really it. And it's so simple that most people fail because they don't do it. Okay. Now this next one I agree with, but maybe not in a formal way. But it has to be covered here. Take a writing / literature classes. And the reason I say I don't agree with it completely is I don't think it necessarily needs to be formal. I use a streaming service called Great Courses. And there are so many amazing courses all over everything in the world. I think you could probably find a great course with a very high-end academic teaching. I'm watching one now that is blowing my mind on utopian / dystopian genre. I never even think because our world today is so dystopian that it really grew out of the utopian genre. And it's not as different as you would think, but it is. It's a little bit less academic than utopian work. But the thing is, you can either spend a lot and go to college, or you can do informal writing groups. That's a good way, especially if there are more experienced writers in there. You can stream through streaming services. There are a myriad of ways you can find ways to improve your. But I always say improve your literature and practice your writing. Now, it definitely would not hurt to do a how to write a novel, like a one-shot kind of class or whatever. But I still think writing style develops as you do it. If you're going to be an indie writer, find an editor friend. And this might mean you have to make a new friend. Go suck up and play around with them, and just get some experience. And because editors can give you some great feedback on, a good editor will not just tell you what to cut out, but what to cut in. Because it's like, I wish there was a little bit more here, Jeffrey. And then they slap you really hard.
Not everyone has to use my editing style. But what Jeff is saying, I do agree with. I did take writing literature classes as a bullet point in the show notes, but I did mean it more general. Like, that just came to mind because that was my experience. But there is absolutely plenty of online and free resources, and there's writing groups. There's tons of people out there that can help you. While we're on this subject, I want to throw a reach out to Scott Shaw. Scott, if you do want to do some writing with me, I had sent you a message on Facebook, but here's a special shout out during the show. I know that you had some difficulty with the last exercise, so I want to offer, my mentorship to help you out. If you're still willing, give me a shout on the Facebook group.
Do you have anything else on classes?
No, I think we'll move on to the next one.
Someone put this to me in a way where it really connected with me, so I wanted to share it. As when you start researching about writing, you start learning about narrative perspectives. The point of view of a novel and the different narrative types, which are typically like autobiography and biography, and these different types of writing book styles. But really, when you cut into the story, there are pretty much two types of narratives that have worked over the millennia. And that is, every book is either a struggle or progress. That's it. It's either a struggle or a progress. And so your stories, your plots should be following one of two things if you want to have an audience in your narrative. There should be some kind of struggle or a progress. And it doesn't matter which one. And there might even be a little bit of both. But And it could be very slow. You talk about pacing of novels. It could be very slow, where it's just the progress where two people are sitting at a kitchen table, and at the end of the conversation, one of the two has a breakthrough. That could be the climax of a story. That's a kind of a Samuel Beckett kind of story, maybe, where it's a very small scope, like two guys sitting on a bench by a tree, but it's still, a story of progress. And so keep those in mind as your basic underpinnings for, when you do it. It's easy to get caught up in genre and point of view and all this other stuff, but we forget the basic thing that a narrative needs. It needs to talk about a struggle, or it needs to talk about progress.
I don't know how much I want to get into that. There's a couple of ideas floating around in my head, but I don't want to confuse everybody, so I think I'm just going to leave you with that. Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, it's like, do some research on a 3-act structure if you want a good story.
Oh, yeah, I did want to mention that. Yeah. Do a little research on 3-act structure.
There's a reason why there are so many 3-act structures. Even in short stories, it's typically a 3-act structure. Especially that one is very important if you want to do narrative fiction. Or different narrative types of books. Like if you look up narrative types of books, you're going to probably find 7. But that's for something as you start working into it and are starting to plan out your novel. We're really just getting you going writing here. And your goal should be to start putting out good stories. And, once you get to a point of a good story, a novel is just a long story.
And
stories
within stories.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. And so really, beyond that, there's a couple other things I think people, I think these are common sense, and I was teasing Michael because he put them in there. But I think they're important to point out because sometimes things that seem like common sense are easily forgotten. Sort of like the 3-act structure or the 2 types of narratives. It becomes easy to forget these last 2 things. And I'm going to have to let Michael do them because he put them down and I teased him about them. But
the last 2 there?
They're actually very important. The last 2.
Do you want to do those now? Because isn't there something before there? So
the 2 types of narratives.
No. I'm reading some of your notes here just to make sure I'm following the right thing.
Wow.
Well, look, I figure if I don't show you a little respect on it, then you're not going to respect it next time I write a show. So, I think it's really important that if you're going to write something, and this is something you can practice too, have an opinion. One of the things that really puts me on this show, and one of the things that Jeff really appreciates my input on this show, is that I have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, and thus a perspective, and it's important, like you have an opinion, you have a perspective. Don't feel afraid to share that. Don't feel afraid to put yourself into the work. Not be like, okay, well, I'm just going to write this great fantasy tale. I need to pull back and I need to write what people want to read. What you don't get is that people want to read you. So you need to be there. You need to share the tale from your personal experience and perspective. That is what makes it special. So don't be afraid of your own opinion. Have an opinion. Okay? And the second big one is you do have to have something to say. Like, you can write a great tale that sweeps across the countryside, but and this is my opinion, you should have something to say in there. Like, it should have a point. As Jeff has stated before, mission statements, novel statements. Was it mission statement was the big one you used to press on?
It's really a mission statement. I do it for novels. I do it for worlds. I have a mission statement for everything.
Yeah. So it should have something to say, your story. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm all for story's sake. Like, that is honestly an excellent way to practice. But if you're putting your heart and soul into something,
that is the most important way. Yeah.
If you're putting your heart and soul into something that is going to be, a big project of yours, it should have something to say, an underlining theme, an idea, a concept, which is actually kind of ironic because the book that I have been neglecting as of late, my NaNoWriMo project, I actually discovered what I was saying after I'd written most of it. I didn't realize what the book was about. I thought I was just writing a zombie tale. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I have really created a very accurate analogy / allegory to something in my life. And I was like, that's the mission statement. That's what the book is actually telling. You're nodding your head. Do you disagree with me?
I don't disagree with you. I'm just realizing that there's work I could do for free and give to people here to help, and that's what I need is more work. Excellent.
You just put more work on your plate.
Yeah.
Do you want to share you want to share a little bit of it, or the work that has to be done?
I'm going to put together an opt-in, and it's going to be the complement to this. So it's going to, instead of being the beginner's primer to writing, it's going to be the beginner's primer to writing a narrative novel. And it probably won't be called that. I'm going to have to come up with a better name, obviously. But the thing is, it's going to be, what are the steps that if Jeffrey started over today, he would do to write, and this is just the writing part of the novel. But it's just because it's a long project, that's like doing something huge. So it's getting it done, even if you don't share it out, is a big achievement. So some things that I think you need to do in there, as you're going, optional things that I think you should do if you want to share it ever, or maybe not this one, but maybe the next one. But just to put together, I'm going to be putting together an opt-in. It will be available by the time this episode goes live.
Hats over the fence now.
Yep.
No, you could edit that out.
I know. Let's do it. Like this whole section will be gone. You're like, Jeff,
What happened to that whole primer you were talking about? You know, the novel. Shh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Liar. So I'm going to put together this primer opt-in for you guys. It'll just be like a simple 1-page thing, maybe 2 pages if I have to add in some description or whatever. But just, I think it's important things, and just for the project of getting your novel done. First draft. First draft done. And so we'll call it the first draft primer.
I like how you're working on the show. There is something else that I want to add to your starting writing, your beginning writer. Like you're just putting words together for the first time. It's okay for it to be bad. Don't be overcritical of yourself. Writing is one of those skills that even the best writers, they don't write awesome stuff all the time. They write crap. Like you have to write through the bad. So don't be critical of yourself. Just get words on the page. Keep writing. Keep practicing. What you have, the perspective you have, the ideas you have, they are worth sharing. And to hone them down, to boil them into something amazing, you just need to keep practicing. You need to keep doing it. Yeah. So when you write something terrible, don't beat yourself up for that.
Well, and that's why if you've listened to this show and you've heard me talk about like novel writing, like when we're talking about NaNoWriMo specifically, I talked about puking out your first draft.
That was helpful to me. I told you when you said that, I actually put that in big, bold letters at the top of the page on a separate screen. So when I was writing my NaNoWriMo, all I had to do was look up to my left and I saw puke it out. That helped me.
Because really, and I found the system, and I'll talk about it just a little bit at the end of the primer. It's the 5-draft system. And obviously, I always when I learn something from other people, I always like to internalize it and make it work better for me. And so I will just briefly talk about the 5-draft system. But essentially, it's draft 1 is really just you getting the basic words on paper. The in our case, the flow of the story, and I think it's a wonderful approach because it really frees you up because the second draft is you self-editing your first draft. You're going to start filling in some plot holes like, wait, this makes no sense. I'm going from here to here. There's no real transition. You'll catch some stuff like that. If you're like me and natural writing, is something that you're still getting better at, which is probably most people. I use Grammarly. Hell, my editor uses this application called Grammarly when she writes because she works for HarperCollins. So I mean, tools like these don't make you bad people. They help speed up your writing. The primer you read will go through there. So if it doesn't make sense, it's not because of the grammar, it's because of my language. You know what I'm saying? But, it's like I can use a tool like that on my second draft now, and I can really, I can, it just connects right up to Word, and then I can just go in and save my novel and go in and make quick additions, and it forces you to think about it the way a copy editor would, someone who's doing the grammatical checks on your book. So at least like those kind of things get cleared away, and it allows you to free up the mind to focus on what content is missing. The third draft, that's an editor. Yeah, that's an actual big person who knows what the heck they're doing. And then between the third and fourth draft, that's where you're sharing out with your beta readers. And you're getting more feedback on things that they think you're missing. And then the fourth draft is you making all of those additions into your book. And then the fifth draft is the one that will be, it's the final markup copying for it to go into publishing. And that way you have this forced path that you're going down. And anyone who's part of the fantasy
community,
Undercroft group that we have on Facebook, that's facebook.com/Undercroft. Or just search for Undercroft and you'll find us. No, I'm stuck on 5 things because there seems to be 5 to anything, including, Kevin Bacon. So,
that's 6 actually.
Sorry,
man.
It should be 5 at this point. Okay.
Well, what Jeff is basically saying is that any big thing that you're going to take on, there's 5 ways to get there, or 5 things that you have to do to get there. And if you identify those 5 things first, it's going to help you immensely achieve your goal. You don't have to know how to do each one of those 5 things once you've identified them. But now that you've identified them, you know where you need to research or learn or, what you have to do.
And at the end, what I'll do is even an additional bonus. Oh, jeez.
So what you're saying is additional bonus would make it 6, like Kevin Bacon.
No. Not another to the draft system, but for a bonus, I will put my 5 things.
Oh, to your primer, you mean? Bonus to your primer.
Yeah. My 5 things to successfully, and that means to make money from, successfully launch a book. Launch an indie book.
Going backwards,
because it'd be different if I was to be published. Sorry.
Going backwards for a second, because this whole episode has been targeted more at the beginning writer and like the very beginnings of something. Not to turn the show into the Charles Lear show, because we've been mentioning him a lot lately, but we have great love for Charles. He wrote something really cool yesterday that I just wanted to share. So this is literally, I'm just going to read his post. And we were talking about word count and writing exercises, and he had said something on that's totally on subject what we're talking about here. He wrote, "For me, writing a book is like driving across country. I know where I start, the beginning. I know where I want to travel, the ending. And I know how many miles I want to drive, total word count. When I figure out how many miles, then I figure out how many miles I need to drive a day. So that's your word count per day, and how many days it will take to get there. With a destination in mind, I can begin my journey and enjoy the trip with whatever happens along the way. If along the journey of my writing, my destination changes because somebody blew up Las Vegas, I can keep going in a new direction, to a new destination rather." So I think that that's important. Like this is something that goes back into an exact thing that I did when I used to tutor algebra. I had a kid and he was intimidated by it. And if you guys are taking on these big writing challenges, you might be intimidated by them at first. But here's what you got to do is break it down. I wrote this problem for this kid that was half a page. It was half a page long. It was this big algebra equation. And he's like, "I can't do that." And I said, "Yes, you can. You're looking at the entire problem, and that's not how you solve the problem. You solve the problem in pieces, and that's the same. It's the same thing with writing. What Charles says in this example here is really great. He breaks it all down into different pieces and then tackles each piece at a time, and that's how I did it with the algebra problem. And that's how you guys should do your big projects: is cut them, look at the whole thing, take a step back, and then start breaking it into chunks that are digestible to your skills. And if you find there's a part in there that you don't have the skills for, then you go get those skills."
Yes. Awesome. And do you want to mention our new, and I believe youngest member of the Undercroft?
Oh yeah, big shout. Well, actually, he did get a shout out in the last episode, but sure, we can shout out James again. I'm trying to find his last name. I know it's something Burger.
Well, I thought we weren't doing last names.
It's not something Burger. It's just James. No, we
for shout outs.
We had
poor Charles. We thrown under the bus.
Right, Charles goes right under the bus. No, we had mentioned last names in initial shout outs, but we shouted out James in the last one. But shouting out James, welcome to the group. And actually, I'll also add just little accolades to James, because he had put some stuff up for such a young writer. I believe he said he's only 20 years old. He's got some really impressive structure to the things that he's working on, and he does tabletop gaming and writing and a lot of world building, which it's great to see someone his age. Yeah. Like, so I would call it accomplished to be as advanced as he is at the age of 20.
Well, to steal that compliment, he does remind me a lot of myself at 20.
Well, Jeff, you can't steal that compliment because you would have to steal that compliment because I would never give that to you.
But no, I mean he doesn't really sleep much, and when he's late at night, he's world building, and if you can't sleep, that's a great way to deal with not sleeping. But my bonus real world task will be figure out a way to sleep 8 hours a night. The sooner you do it, the better life you'll live.
Are we ready to bring this in for a landing?
Land it, baby.
Okay, before we get into the tasks, before we get into the tasks, I would be remiss because it has been a while since I have mentioned that if you want to help the show out a ton, go to www.garduel.com/Amazon for all of your Amazon needs. If you're going to go buy something on Amazon, please go through our portal, and the show gets a kickback. It helps us out and helps us keep bringing you great content like this. So it's not going to change your prices, not going to tack anything on or give you a discount. It's just going to help us out, and we super appreciate it. So if you guys would go through Garduel to get to Amazon, that would be fantastic.
And here's a great add-on trick. Go through there and then go look at the deals of the day.
Deals of the day.
That's usually where the best deals are. Yeah. So go in and if they have something you really want, buy it. And if you ever see my book there, buy lots of copies.
Yeah, share them with your friends.
Every time you read a new copy, it's like a whole new reading towards becoming a better writer. But only
that's
for
true. Yeah, that's true.
Wow, that's
that's okay. It's all right. I will allow that. So the world builder's task for the day is to write a book report. You've been doing all this reading, or if you haven't, then read a book and write a book report on it. And what about the real world task of the day?
Okay, well, and I love this one because this is a problem in the Ingram household, definitely, and I'm pretty sure in the Miller household.
I've actually tackled this one, so it's not a big problem in the Miller household now.
If you ever see one of my Facebook videos, you know that there's a giant bookshelf that I do it in front of. And the books there do kind of shift, and we're trying to get friends' books and people who've given me books sort of
visually
or given to me and my wife, so like our friends can get some shout outs there if they have a physical book that we can put out there. But over time, you're going to have an overabundance of books when you become a reader. And so share the books out with people, especially for me, my nonfiction books. If I know someone who I think it can nail and help, if I have a copy, sometimes I'll even buy an additional copy to give it away. But give out the old books, the ones that helped you, the ones that, even if it's just a good minute, because fiction helps people too. It helps expand our minds. And that's the reason why fiction today is much more complicated than it was 200 years ago, because people's minds have become better at seeing the patterns. And so they want deeper and more intricate patterns. Yeah. So, the thing is, give those books out to people who will enjoy them.
Yeah, the basic thing is we're coming into spring, so this is a spring cleaning thing. Just get rid of some of the old books. You don't need them anymore. Yeah. If you've already read them and you don't plan on rereading them, like I have a collector's mentality. So I had so many books, and I was like, "Oh gosh, I loved this book. Oh, I loved this book. I love this book." But then I was like, I can't get rid of this book. I'm probably never going to read that book again. So I was like, okay, I can get rid of this. So I got rid of a whole bunch of books. I have since, I will admit, because it's kind of contradictory to the task that I'm recommending on doing, that there's a couple of books that I got rid of that I have now since regretted gotten rid of. And there's a couple of books that I held on to just because I love them so much. Like there's only there's only like 3 books that I've read more than once, and I did keep those.
Here's my theory on that. If you love the book so much that you regret getting rid of it, do the author who made that book a favor.
Oh yeah, go
buy.
Buy a brand new copy.
Especially if my name's on the book,
or mine. If you see how
I'll sell Survey at Jeffrey B today. Forget me for a second, but just really support the authors, the guys who do those covers when you can. But share out the books, because you maybe just increased a fan, and maybe that book they got for free, but maybe the next book they end up buying because.
And even more so, like let's even take it even deeper. You might give somebody the book that ends up being the catalyst for them to either be a huge enjoyer of that content, whether it be a genre or just reading in general, or it might inspire them to actually want to get into this sort of thing. I mean, it certainly did for me.
Yeah, or going back to me and Michael as kids. Turn us from non-readers to readers later in life. That's difficult. And I'm assuming like Michael's family, like mine, were a lot of readers. And at least in my family, I was the exception to the rule because of my eye problems. But that helped shift me over to becoming a reader too. And really reading fiction, reading nonfiction really does make your life better. And there's something about actually holding the book I do like ebooks because I can carry 1,000 with me, but there's something about holding the book too that is still special to me. And actually, there's studies that prove that you actually retain stuff better if you really want to ingest a book. Get the paper copy too, because there's actual proof that shows that you will actually retain more of it if you have the tactile experience of holding it. I don't know why, but that's what the study showed now. But of course, next week there'll be a new study to disprove it. So
and the thing is funny about that, it's totally true with me. Like I bought an e-reader. I bought a tablet, almost solely. Obviously, it was going to be like a household tablet, but I totally intended it for me to be a reader. I was like, oh, this is great because ebooks are cheaper. I can hold tons of them. I can do like tons of reading with this. I never read off of that thing. I always have a real paper book. Like I just, that's how I prefer to read. I don't like doing it.
Well, the thing is, I will do it, but that's like I'm at the doctor's office for 5 minutes and I forgot my paper book.
Yeah.
So I have my e-reader and it's my backup. Or if I'm on an airplane, and I don't, I finished the book I'm on, I have 1,000 other books I can start. So there's a bonus to both. But I think if you really are enjoying a book, you need a paper copy of it, signed by me, even if it's not my book. Which is really easy at this point since I don't have any books actually published.
And it's funny, like you actually might have a published author that is a friend of yours. You're like, I'll sign their book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Don's a personal friend of mine. I just want to say this was a great book, Joe.
Yeah. Thanks so much for reading Don's book. All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
We're having a blast here, folks. We love our audience. Remember, go to Facebook group and join us in the Undercroft, and we'll see you there.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builder's Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builder's Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.